Morning. I'm thrilled to be here at my first Film Expo. My name's John Pohl, and I'm going to talk to you today about messaging. Are you as excited as I am? You probably aren't. I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that I'm the only person in this room who spends 12 hours a day or more thinking about messaging. You can't do that. You've got other responsibilities. I get that. But if I do my job right, sometime over the next 45 minutes, you're going to conclude that your company somehow needs to make a higher priority of developing effective messaging for three reasons. First, it can significantly increase your sales. Secondly, it doesn't take a lot of effort. It takes a lot of intelligence, but not a lot of effort. And thirdly, it can actually allow you to reduce your marketing budget. That's the power of effective messaging. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to think back on your career and think about whether or not you've ever had an experience that's at all like what I'm about to describe. Your company has discovered a screaming need in the marketplace, something that your target audience badly wants but isn't getting. So the company makes a commitment. They commit to significant dollars and effort and ingenuity and time in search of a solution to this significant problem, this significant opportunity. And finally, after several years, maybe many years, you're there. You've got the objective data, the evidence that says that you've come up with a solution that's better than anything else in the market. So you launch. And it's a big deal for you, for the whole company. And after only a short while, maybe a year, maybe a little less, it's evidently clear to everybody in your company that your new product was a fail. Show of hands, how many of you have had anything like that experience at least once in your career? Show of hands. Thank you. See, my hand is raised too. And the truth is that the fails that we experience collectively in this room, in many cases, maybe in most cases, were unnecessary. And that's why I'm here today. The title of my talk is Avoid Unnecessary Business Fails. Send the right message, get the right result. Another question for you. Roughly what percentage of all new products would you guess fail? Any ideas? Any guesses? 70? Yeah. Not bad. You're close. The late great innovation guru Clayton Christensen of the Harvard Business School calculated that about 95% of all new products fail. 95%. That's embarrassing. Well, this gentleman has a diagnosis for what one of the big problems is behind all of those fails. People that are probably all too young, this is a character from an iconic 1960s movie called Cool Hand Luke. Have any of you seen it? No? Well, this gentleman played a warden. He had a classic line in that movie.
What we've got here is failure to communicate.
Now, that probably sounds really weird, but if you watch the movie, it's a great line. And I think we would all agree that failure to communicate is a big problem in life in general. And certainly it's a problem in business. And I've seen over the course of my career all too many times when a company will have a great product. They've done all the heavy lifting, and they got it right, only to see that product fail in the marketplace because they dropped the ball with messaging just before they crossed the goal line. Messaging. Really, that's the cause of the problem? Well, think about it. If you've got objective research, the facts that tell you that you check all these boxes for superior technology and performance, better than anything the competition has. You're reasonably priced. Your product is readily available, accessible to the audience. And you've got a sufficient budget to tell your story. You check all those boxes and you still fail, then by definition, you can't have checked the box for effective messaging. Let's think about what is the goal of messaging. just step back. What's the goal of messaging? I think most marketers would say something like this. They'd say that the goal of messaging is making people think that you're the best at what you do. It's a pretty good definition, right? Makes sense. I kind of adhered to that for the first part of my career. But then a few years ago, I saw an even better definition. And that definition was this, that the goal of messaging isn't making people think you're the best at what you do. It's making people think you're the only one who does what you do. Think about that. What companies out there are thought of that way by the marketplace? Do you think of any companies that maybe are kind of in that camp of they're the only ones who do what they do? Google? It's a good one. Any others? Apple maybe? Nvidia? But clearly, it's a small club. Getting into that club isn't easy. But it's certainly something to aspire to. It's certainly something to shoot for. By the way, any guesses as who was the author of that brilliant line about how the purpose, goal of messaging is to make people think that you're the only one who does what you do? Any guesses? Well, believe it or not, the author of that line was Jerry Garcia. Because I'm not a Deadhead, but I've got a lot of friends who are. And they will tell you that the Grateful Dead is pretty much the only band that has ever existed in the history of the planet. So messaging is critical, which means that words are critical. I've got a favorite word. The word is provocative. Serving or tending to provoke, excite, or stimulate. And that's what I hope to do here today. To provoke you into doing whatever you can to help your company take messaging more seriously. Do whatever you can to help your company make sure it has not just better messaging, but provocative messaging. When I say provocative messaging, I'm not talking about this. I'm not talking about something that's sensationalistic or in bad taste or inappropriate anyway. I'm talking about this, something that is interesting, it's positive, it makes people want to read on. Because I have to tell all the marketers in the audience that the goal of marketing, and I think you know this, but maybe it's not been worded this way before, the goal of marketing is to provoke. It's to provoke your target audience into first considering buying your product and then ultimately buying your product. In fact, I don't even know why they call it marketing. Marketing is an old word. It's what June Cleaver used to do on Leave It to Beaver. She would go marketing, which meant going to the supermarket. We should call it provoking. Maybe someday there'll be a room full of chief provoking officers. I hope so. But if you have provocative messaging, it has the power to make your target audience believe that your solution, whether it's a new product or a new service, your solution has the ability to open up a golden door of opportunity by solving a huge problem that they have or meeting a huge need that they have better than anything else. And here's why this is so important. No offense, but I'm pretty sure that unless they're a current customer of yours already, no one is going to wake up tomorrow morning and think that the first thing they're going to do when they get to the office is to give you a call, or to give one of your colleagues, or to go to your website. Because they're too busy. They've got so many other issues that they're dealing with. They've got financial issues, perhaps, or personnel issues, or competitive issues. So if you want to get them to even consider switching from whatever they're using now to your product, to your service, it's on you. You've got to provoke them. You've got to get their attention, and then when you do that, then you've got to convince them that you've got the better mousetrap. So, what is provocative messaging? It's a pretty simple formula. There are two components. The first is a customer promise. The customer promise has three criteria. It's genuinely valuable to the customer, it's highly unique, and it's 100% deliverable. You have to keep in mind that if you're reaching out with advertising or whatever form of messaging you're using to somebody who's not buying you now, they may not know much about your company. So it's not enough for you to say, we do this, we do that, we do all these great things. You have to also give them reason to believe that you can deliver. Because they've all been burned before by companies that made great promises that couldn't deliver. The second part of the provocative messaging equation is clever execution. Clever execution is what brings the customer promise to life in a engaging, believable, memorable way. Let's focus on customer promise for a little bit. The Work Advisory and the LinkedIn B2B Institute did a huge study on the effectiveness and the role of customer promises in B2B marketing. They looked at 700 plus B2B marketing campaigns, 700 plus. And what they found was this, and it's good news. Quote, B2B campaigns with a customer promise at their heart are 3 times more likely to generate market share increases than non-customer promise campaigns. 3 times more likely. Why would you ever have any type of a campaign that didn't have a customer promise in it? Knowing, although you probably didn't know it, but knowing that it can increase your chances of increasing your market share by 3 times. Here's the bad news. Of those 700 plus campaigns, only 18%, less than 1 in 5, had a customer promise. I don't know what those other 82% of the campaigns were talking about, but they weren't talking about a customer promise, which is a shame. And here's another reason why it's a shame. This is the power of a customer promise. Another conclusion from this study. The huge advantage of putting a customer promise at the heart of a campaign is that marketers are virtually guaranteed to get better results without spending any extra money. And I love this line. Marketing is expensive. Customer promises are free. So let's look at the second half of the provocative messaging formula, and that's clever execution. And whenever I hear the word execution, I think of John McKay. He was the head coach of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the NFL in the 1970s. 1976, the Buccaneers went 0-14. NFL only played 14 games then, which was a good thing for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So late in the year, after they'd gotten demolished yet again, Coach McKay went to the post-game press conference to take questions from the media. And the first question he got was, Coach, what do you think about the team's execution? His response, I think it's a hell of an idea. Now, that's not the kind of execution I'm talking about. I'm not talking about execution that ends life. I'm talking about execution that brings life to customer promises. Now, there are all sorts of different types of executions, right? Every type of ad is an execution. Be it a TV ad, radio, magazine, newspaper, billboard, social media, a PowerPoint presentation, a sales presentation to a prospective customer or current customer. That's an execution. Public relations is a form of execution. News releases. Your trade show booth is an execution. And every time an execution has exposure to a customer, that's called a touch. Okay? How many touches would you think it takes to make a sale in the B2B world? How many times do you have to touch a prospect to turn that prospect into a customer? Can you guess? Well, one major study concluded that it takes 27 touches. Wow, that's a lot. It's almost scary, right? How are we going to do that? Here's the good news about provocative messaging. If you've got provocative messaging, each of your touches is going to be more effective. They're going to do a better job of getting attention and convincing the target audience that you've got the right solution for them. So what does that mean? It's going to take fewer touches to make the sale, which means you're going to have to spend less money to make the sale. So I'm talking about clever executions. Let's talk about the importance of being clever. Clever is another one of my favorite words. And to be clever is really just to be 2 things. It's to be smart and creative. It's not enough to be one or the other. You've got to be both. If your messaging is just smart, it could be boring. If it's just creative, it could be mindless entertainment. How many times have you seen a TV commercial that you thought was really entertaining, really funny? You loved it. You saw it several times. Maybe you tell your friends to look out for it. And for the life of you, you can't remember what brand was being advertised in that commercial. And if you do remember the brand, you probably don't remember what it is about that commercial and what it is about that product that made it better than anything else. Now, I've always had this hunch that there's a halo effect the leveraging effect with clever advertising, clever messaging. And it goes something like this. If someone sees, they don't know anything about you, they see your ad and it's clever, they like it for some reason, find it engaging, I think that at least on a subconscious level, a lot of those customers are going to think, well, their messaging is clever, maybe everything else they do is clever, maybe their technology is clever, their manufacturing process, their customer support. If they think all those things, that makes them that much more likely to ultimately come around to trying your product. So I've had this hunch for years, and I decided to see if there's any scientific evidence that supports my hunch, my theory. It turns out there is. The Journal of Marketing, which is, many people would say, the Bible of marketing, did a significant study, a meta-analysis of 67 different studies around the world of how advertising works, and specifically the role that creativity plays in affecting the customer's thinking about a product. And by the way, when they say creativity in this study, the way they define creativity is essentially the way I define cleverness, smart and creative. So here's their main conclusion. Advertising creativity has statistically significant positive effects on perceived signals: brand value, brand quality, brand trust, brand credibility, attention and interest in the ad. In short, if you're using creative messaging, if you're using creative executions, your target audience is much more likely to pay attention to your product, take an interest in your product, to believe that that product offers great quality, to believe it offers great value, and to trust what you say. Question, can AI be clever? Obviously, we're hearing about AI constantly, and we're only going to hear more about it. And for good reason, because AI is amazing. It can do so many things. I use it all the time, I'm sure you do too. But can AI be clever? Well, I thought I'd put that question to an expert. So I asked an expert in the subject, can AI be clever? And I'm going to read this because it's a little long, but I think you'll find it interesting. Quote, while AI excels at generating content quickly, identifying patterns, and mimicking styles based on vast data sets, it has fundamental limitations when it comes to true cleverness or creativity. Clever ideas often arise from intuition, emotional insight, and an understanding of nuance, context, and irony. Areas where AI lacks genuine comprehension. AI does not possess personal experience, curiosity, or original intent. It creates by recombining existing information rather than inventing something wholly new. As a result, its output can be derivative, formulaic, or miss the subtle spark that defines human ingenuity and wit. See a lot of nodding heads. So, it seems clear that AI cannot be clever. By the way, the expert that gave me this opinion is ChatGPT. Now, I like the sound of that, confirmed my hopes and my thinking, but I wanted to take it a little bit further and put it to the test. A couple of years ago, I trademarked a term. I invented a word for this halo effect, this leveraging effect that I think clever messaging has. It makes people think that everything else you do is clever. So I asked this of ChatGPT on a different day. I'd like to invent a word that describes how clever messaging has a halo effect by making customers assume that your technology, manufacturing process, customer support, and everything else you do are also clever. Please create 10 words that describe that effect. Here's what they gave me. Halogic, or halogic, I'm not sure how it's pronounced. Credit chain, intellectual, smart sheen, as opposed to Charlie sheen. Mind halo, witfluence, branduction, savvy surge, perceptual lift, and think glow. Wow. So that's what AI did. Here's what the human came up with. Here's what I came up with a couple years before that. Leverage. Now I know that no parent ever had an ugly child, but I think I'll stick with this for the time being. Speaking of clever, those Liberty Mutual ads are really clever, aren't they? Said no one ever. Now, I'll be honest, I don't know a thing about Liberty Mutual as an insurance company. They could be a great insurance company, but my assumption is that they're not. And here's my logic. If the executives at Liberty Mutual who approved this campaign and spent hundreds of millions of dollars on it think that this campaign is the least bit helpful, informative, convincing, or humorous for that matter, I'm wondering what other mistakes they might be making with their judgment in running an insurance company. But maybe I was too harsh on them. So I thought, okay, that's my gut, but maybe my gut's wrong. So I decided to look at some factual support. I thought, let's take a look and see what has their revenue trend been in the first 4 years that they ran this campaign and spent hundreds of millions of dollars. And it turns out that from 2019 to 2023, their revenue grew by 14%. That's not 14% per year, that's 14% total over a 4-year period. That didn't come close to keeping up with inflation during that time. So I'm going, aha, I was right. And I thought, well, wait a minute, maybe that's not fair. Maybe the whole insurance industry had tough going during those 4 years. So I thought, let's take a look at a competitor, Progressive, which happens to have what I consider to be much more clever ads. Well, how did they do during that same time period? They grew by 59%, over 4 times what Liberty Mutual grew. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I rest my case. Well, keeping the legal terminology going, I have a confession to make. I'm up here pontificating about how provocative messaging is the answer or an answer in the B2B space, in the B2B world, including the phone market. Now, I have to be totally honest and say that for the first half of my career, I didn't come close to the B2B world. I was in the consumer products world, and I enjoyed it. I had a great time there, a lot of fun, and had some great success. I was a director of marketing or VP of marketing, depending on the company, for such companies as Dial Corp, Kellogg's, Cobra, and E&J Gallo Winery. These were all market-leading companies, or at least they had the #1 brand in the industry. And I never thought of leaving until one day I got a phone call from a headhunter. And he said that there was a company called Hugh Freedy. You've never heard of that company. They're in Chicago. They're the world's largest manufacturer of dental instruments, which are sold to the dental practice. So they're a B2B company. And they were interested in talking to me about possibly becoming their senior VP of global marketing and strategic planning. And I said, well, I don't know how to tell you this, but I've never spent 1 second working in the B2B world, and I sure don't know anything about marketing to dentists. And they said they know, that's why they're interested. Well, this is interesting. So I agreed to meet with them and had several meetings over the course of several weeks. And I learned that while they were the largest company in the dental instrument space, which is a small part of the overall industry, but in their category, they're #1. They're also the most expensive line because they had the best products. But they were taking it hard. They were losing market share over a period of about 4 years to a bevy of low-priced competitors. So they were told what they needed to do is go get somebody maybe more strategic, more creative than B2B marketing tended to be. So I thought, well, it's kind of interesting to see what happens if I take what I've learned in the B2C world, tweak it, and apply it to the B2B world. So ultimately, as you can guess, I took the job. And I'm not going to lie, when it was announced that they had hired me, a lot of people in the industry thought that they had made a monumentally boneheaded decision in hiring somebody with my background. And I had a lot of friends tell me that they thought I had made a monumentally boneheaded decision in walking into a David and Goliath situation. Because while Hugh Freedy was #1 in dental instruments, as I said, that's a small part of the industry. So to compete for the dentist's attention, we had to compete against everybody in the entire industry, including some mega companies like Procter & Gamble, and Colgate-Palmolive, and 3M. And on top of that, not only did these companies have much deeper pockets than Hugh Freedy, they had Michigan Avenue and Madison Avenue ad agencies, while all Hugh Freedy had was a small in-house agency that was one of the groups that would be reporting to me. But I like a challenge and took the job. So the first thing I wanted to do was to learn everything I could about every one of the products. And I found out that looking at all the studies that have been done, they really did have the best products, primarily because they were more durable. They just lasted longer than anybody else. So I got carte blanche to overhaul everything, all the marketing, advertising, website, literature, you name it. But I wanted to start with a tagline. I wanted a tagline that did three things. That it reminded people that Hugh Freedy was number one. It reminded them why Hugh Freedy was number one. And it gave the company some swagger. Swagger is another one of my favorite words. I think any company, especially a market leader, should have some swagger. Not cockiness, swagger. Anyway, here's the tagline we came up with. Hugh Freedy, first, because we last. Did some research of that and some other taglines, and this clearly one, and that set the foundation for everything else we did. So, from that point on, we developed, as I said, new executions in every possible area. And I'm not going to take you through those, but I do want to just show you a couple of ads. It'll just give you a sense for kind of the approach we took. Every one of these ads took a very distinctive visual approach so that they would pop. When the dentist is going through a journal, they would see this and go, whoa, what is this? And I can tell you, no ads in the dental industry look like that. You can't probably read all the headlines, but basically the headlines were fairly clever and they certainly reinforced the visuals. And the visuals illustrated, in most cases, the benefits of the product. So it was all about not just getting attention, but showing here's why this product is better for you. Here's why this is the best product in this particular segment. So how did it all work? Well, it turns out that an independent research firm does a major study every year of the print advertising in the entire dental industry. And they've got a formula for measuring effectiveness of the advertising. And I'm proud to say that during all 4 years I was at Hugh Freedy, competing against all of these big names up here, along with 70 other companies, because a total of over 80 companies were evaluated in this study. Hugh Freedy finished in the top 10 with our little in-house agency all 4 years. Actually, we did a little bit better than that. All 4 years, Hugh Freedy had the number one most effective ad in the entire dental industry. Now that's nice, because the words are nice, but what's more important is that we reversed the market share decline pretty quickly, and during all 4 years, we set records for revenue and for profits. And I tell you all this not to boast, or maybe to boast just a little bit. I tell you to illustrate that provocative messaging, this approach that I created, kind of concocted by taking what I learned in the B2C world, tweaked it, brought it to the B2B world. It works in the B2B world. So, flushed with that success, I decided to pursue a lifelong dream. I opened up my own ad agency, marketing agency called 14 Floor Solutions. But the important thing about this is that I focused on B2B. I determined that I was going to be a B2B marketing agency. Why? Because the consequences of making a bad decision in the consumer world are pretty minor. If I'm marketing shaving cream, somebody sees my ad and they say, yeah, I'll give it a try. They spend a couple of bucks. What's the worst thing that can happen? Oh, my skin doesn't feel quite as baby soft as I thought it was going to. Oh, the humanity, big deal. But in the B2B space, if a buyer or a buying team or whoever's responsible for making the buying decisions at a company, if they make a bad decision, and their company spends hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe millions of dollars, and they switch from whoever they are using to you, and it doesn't work, the consequences for that buyer are humongous. They're probably career-ending. They're certainly going to put the kibosh in any near-time promotion. So it's much tougher to convince somebody in the B2B space to make a change, to change their behavior from brand X to your brand, because the consequences of that being a bad decision are so much worse. That's why I'm making such a big deal out of provocative messaging. You've got to have the right messaging to make sure that they'll say, you know what, I'm taking a risk, but it's a smart risk. So, talking again about provocative messaging, how it can work in the B2B space, and I say that because it's worked in every B2B market I've ever worked in. Zinc plating, air filtration systems, financial services, health tech, facial recognition, automotive, and many, many more. So what I want to do now is end by taking you through a provocative messaging case. I want to do it for two reasons. One is I want to show you what the process is for coming up with a customer promise. And secondly, for those of you who are responsible for evaluating messaging, evaluating executions that your marketing team or your agency developed for you, I want to show you what the process can be and see if that execution meets the criteria for a creative execution, a clever execution. So in this particular case, it involved one of my first clients with my agency. The company was created in response to a significant problem that they had discovered that not many people knew about. That is the fact that oral cancer is rising. For years, oral cancer had been declining because the number one cause of oral cancer, tobacco usage, was declining. But suddenly, about 20 years ago, there was an uptick, and these guys noticed it, and they knew why it happened, and that is the fact that there was a new cause of oral cancer, and that's the human papillomavirus. And that is transmitted, candidly, more often than not, through oral sex. It was a big problem, and nobody was really doing anything about it at the time. So they started this company, and they wanted to attack two main problems. First is the high fatality rate of oral cancer due to late detection. And with oral cancer, late detection usually means it's too late. Another issue that they're tackling is that when an oral surgeon would go to remove the cancer that was detected, more than half the time they would leave something behind. They couldn't get it all. Now the reason for both of those problems is the same thing. Early stage oral cancer is below the surface of the oral mucosal tissue. It's below the surface, and it's impossible to detect with the naked eye. But guess what? Naked eye inspection is the technique that dentists use to look for oral cancer. Dentists were the healthcare provider that have always been the most likely to find oral cancer because they're looking in people's mouths. The solution, the product's called the Velscope, the first device that can see early stage oral cancer that's impossible to see with the naked eye. And they had a couple of extra challenges. One is they had to not only explain that to dentists, but they had to convince the dentists that what they were doing for all these years was wrong. That's never an easy thing to tell people. And they also had a problem in that their marketing budget was low. They'd had a large marketing budget at one time, and they spent it in support of a campaign that a prior agency had developed that didn't work. Failed miserably. That's why they brought me in. So here's how we crafted the customer promise. As you recall, there are three components of a customer promise. So how is the Velscope genuinely valuable in the eyes of the customer? Velscope facilitates the potentially life-saving early detection and surgical removal of oral cancer that cannot be seen with the naked eye. Basically, we're saying this could help you, if you're a dentist, save lives. And if that's not genuinely valuable, I don't know what is. Secondly, how is it highly unique? It's the only product that can do this thanks to its exclusive, keyword exclusive, direct fluorescence visualization technology. And how do we know this is 100% deliverable by your company? It's backed by over $50 million in research by the National Institutes of Health, and it's recommended by 94% of dentists who use it. 94%, that's a big number, especially when you're talking about a product that aims to do something as important and earth-shattering as saving lives. Now we had to find out, and I want you to see how you determine if something is a clever execution. First of all, here are the 6 criteria that I recommend. First, does it reinforce the customer promise? If it doesn't, stop evaluating it. Just toss it away. Don't waste any more time on it. Secondly, does it attract attention? Again, your target audience is busy. You've got to have something that's going to get their attention quickly. Does it emphasize the brand? What's the point of advertising or messaging if no one's going to remember what your brand was? Is it focused? If you're doing a print ad, and your target audience sees it in the page and it's busy, and it looks overwhelming, they're probably going to say, I don't have time for this, and they're going to turn the page. So it's got to have focus so that they're going to stay and get the message. Is it engaging? It's something that is interesting, enjoyable, maybe even fun for them to read. Now, two of the best ways to be engaging can be to have some entertainment value or maybe even humor. Clearly, those two options were out in this case. We're not going to use entertainment, we're not going to use humor when we're talking about cancer. And finally, is it memorable? Does it stick, or does it go in one ear, in one eye, and out the other? So here's the first ad we developed, and we're only going to use one execution for this exercise. I know you can't read the fine print, but as you can see, I hope that we use an iceberg metaphor with the headline, "There's more to oral cancer than meets the eye." This is our first ad, and here is essentially how we evaluated that when it was first presented to us. Does it reinforce the customer promise? I can assure you that every word that's in a red box now up on this screen reinforces the customer promise. We take customer promises very seriously. And there basically wasn't a word on the page that didn't reinforce that customer promise. Does it attract attention? You can use your own judgment as to whether or not this would attract your attention if you were flipping through a magazine. We felt that it would definitely attract attention in a dental journal. We'd never seen an ad remotely like this. And on top of the fact that we had the words oral cancer in the headline, which should be a grabber, we felt we would do a good job on that count. Does it emphasize the brand? Here we thought we did a pretty good job too. Logo is good size and it's against a white background, so it pops. What drives me crazy is when you see a logo against a busy background where you can't even make the logo out. Or if the logo is just tiny, which happens all too often. I think too many ad agencies, when they're designing ads, they think they're designing artwork as opposed to a selling piece. So you've got to emphasize the brand. Is it focused? Honestly, that's the criterion that we gave this execution the least good marks on, because it's not that focused. There's a lot more body copy there than I would normally like to see in that. So there's a risk that someone's going to say, wow, this is going to take too much work to go through. But we're talking about oral cancer, we're talking about saving lives. We felt we couldn't just be glib and say a few things. We had to give the dentist reason to believe that we knew what we were talking about, that we really could help discover oral cancer in early stages. So we felt that under the circumstances, this did an acceptable job in terms of being focused. Is it engaging? Again, couldn't be funny, couldn't be entertaining. We thought it was somewhat engaging, though. We thought that the graphic was interesting. The headline was maybe a little bit clever in conjunction with the graphic. We also thought we had a pretty good tagline. We wanted the tagline to do two things. We wanted to convey that this product will help you detect oral cancer in early stages, and that once you discover it and you try to remove it, it's not going to leave anything behind. I just used about 20 words to describe what our objectives were for the tagline, but the tagline that we use has only 6 words, and they're all pretty small words. Get it early, get it all. And again, in our research, we found that dentists really liked that as well. They thought it was catchy, but they thought it was really to the point. And finally, is it memorable? Again, hard to predict what we thought it would be. Again, it's unlike anything else in the industry in terms of its visual impact. And again, we're talking oral cancer, we're talking the ability to save lives. So we thought that would be memorable. So did it work? Well, the whole campaign in its entirety, and that was the first kickoff of that campaign, it definitely worked. Our sales more than tripled, despite much less money to support it. It tripled in less than a year and a half. We were getting so much attention from that advertising that suddenly we were getting awards. People were noticing us, the award givers were noticing us, giving us awards, which gave us even more attention. That was free publicity. The company had a successful exit, which was great news for the owners of the company. Any owners in the audience would appreciate that. And after 17 years in the market, it's still number 1. So that's my case. That's my presentation. Basically, there are 4 things I hope you'll take with you. First, even the most innovative products won't sell themselves. They need messaging. They need provocative messaging. Because provocative messaging can greatly increase your success rate, greatly increase your revenue. The 2 key components to provocative messaging are customer promise and clever execution. And finally, the power of provocative business to be such that it can actually allow you to reduce your spending. So, thank you for listening. I hope you found this interesting. I hope I provoked you at least a little bit. I also hope you have a great rest of the show, a safe ride home, and a wonderful weekend. Thank you so much.